So you should have already watched Understanding Your Fear System. And now we're going to move into talking about managing your fear system. But I want to start by talking about another part of your fear system, which is what I call the worry brain. This is the cognitive aspect of our fear system. And thinking plays a role in helping us stay out of danger in the future. So we use our critical thinking skills to review past dangers and find ways to avoid them in the future. So as you just learned, you learn what happens when your fear system gets set off. This part of the fear system helps us prevent future dangers, which is great because we need that too. We need to plan for future dangers to keep ourselves safe. The problem is that in modern society, this part of our brain can go into overdrive. So culturally, we really add to that overdrive. If you listen to the news or read the news or even interact with people, you may notice how we're constantly focused on bad news and danger. And we're naturally attracted to news of dangers so that we can protect ourselves. But when we're constantly confronted with that danger in the media or in other parts of our lives, our bodies are not built to manage that. And this is also where our storytelling brain comes into play. So we are storytelling creatures. And what we often do is create a story about how the world is a dangerous place and that we are in constant danger from things like terrorism, muggings, viral infections, earthquakes, and the list goes on and on. All of this engages our fear system because our body doesn't really know the difference between a real situation and when it's just a story that we're telling ourselves. So, our mentally created fears. There's a way in which our thoughts become reality. And we can end up in a state of constant arousal, which is not good for our bodies or our spirits. And here's the deal, our brains naturally stick to the negative for our survival. So you remember back to the last presentation where I talked about one of the roles of the amygdala is to hold on to negative memories. So we naturally do that already. And we can end up magnifying that with our storytelling brain. Now, it's in its healthier guise, the storytelling brain also helps us make sense of our world, come to terms with our losses, and create magnificent solutions for our daily challenges and needs. But it takes a lot of work to counter the negativity that constantly sticks in our negative seeking brains. Here's another piece of the worry brain, too, that's kind of interesting. So, statistically, 90% of what we worry about actually never comes to pass. And there's a little trick that goes along with that because we can begin to think, and we often do, that all the worrying that we do actually is successful strategy because 90% of what we worry about never comes to pass. So it must be working, right? So there's a bit of magical thinking that can take place with this. We think that the worry that we're doing is actually preventing danger. Now, there is a bit of truth to that, and that if I'm worried about an earthquake, here I live in California and earthquakes are a reality, well, that worry can lead me to put together an earthquake kit and come up with a plan for what we're going to do should we have an earthquake here. And that's smart. So my worry brain can lead me to actually come up with some solutions. But if I'm worried all the time, and I've already done my earthquake kit and I still think about that earthquake over and over and over again, and my fear system is going off, I'm not serving myself very well. So we can spend a lot of time worrying about things that will never come to pass and that are not even likely, and we get stuck. And of course, a lot of our future thinking, so another way to look at this is catastrophizing or future fears. A lot of our future thinking is based on experiences in the past. And we get these beliefs about how the world operates based on our experience of the past when we may have been hurt, either emotionally or physically. And it leads us to believe that that's how the future is going to be. But remember that anything that we think about the future is only speculation. And so what to do? Balancing out your nervous system can help a lot around this. And actually, I've already given you one great tool for that. So I actually learned my presence awareness meditation practice by working with a mystic. And I came at it from the perspective of wanting deeper meaning in my life. So I came at it from a spiritual perspective. But I was really gratified to find out later that there's actually a science or an understanding about the way the body works that backed up what I was doing physically. So becoming present, being aware of your body and your surroundings, you're actually utilizing your parasympathetic nervous system and creating balance in your life. So there's a word for it. It's called orienting. And it's what we naturally do once a danger is over. So if you ever watch a little kid, you'll notice that, they might have gotten upset or frightened. And then when they get comforted, they pause and they start to look around and they become more present. Now, of course, there's a social aspect to that with the parent coming in and engaging with them. So you can see how that ventral vagal part of the parasympathetic nervous system also plays a role, because social engagement also helps calm us down. So I came at this practice from a spiritual perspective, but the result for me has been I am a far calmer person than I was in the past. I actually spent the earlier part of my life being a rather nervous person. And it's not that I can't go there at times, but overall, I am much calmer. And I have people tell me all the time how calming it is to be around me. And I credit that to the presence awareness practice that I do every day. So being present can work really well. And one very simple thing that you can do if you're feeling anxiety is to pause and start by feeling your feet on the ground. Notice what it's really like to feel your feet on the ground. Become aware of the entire surface of the bottom of your feet. Notice the places where you feel the pressure of the floor pushing up into them and where there's no contact with the floor. So in the arches, for instance. And then add in awareness of your palms. Feel the tingle of the atmosphere against your skin. And then become aware of how your breath is responding to your awareness. So you may have noticed I don't usually ask you to take a deep breath, and there's a reason for that. It's because when we breathe in, what happens is we actually raise our heart rate. It's far better to notice when we exhale, because it's actually the exhale that brings in the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's why I always tell you to become aware of your breath and not necessarily change it. There's another benefit to this too. So being present with your sensation is also one great way to stop that mental hamster wheel in your brain. And it can give you relief from repeated fears and worries and any over-analyzing. So when you're totally present with your sensation in your body, there's no room for that mental hamster wheel mind. So I want to add in a little bit here about trauma, just because I actually never know who's going to be taking this course with me. And if you experience trauma, especially in your childhood, then your fear and anxiety can be more entrenched in your nervous system. So early trauma has huge impact on developing brains. And for some people, if the trauma is extreme enough, those people never fully develop a sense of self, because the body's not a safe place to be. In order to develop a sense of self, we need to be able to be in our body. And if it's not safe, we might want to escape our body. And I'm not going to go deep into this, but I want to bring it up because, first of all, traditional talk therapy is typically not enough to heal deep trauma, and talking about the memories, if you can access them, can often re-traumatize people. So the great news is that the practice of psychology is finally catching up with this. So that guy, Stephen Porges, his understanding really helped out. There's another man, you may have heard of him. His name is Bessel van der Kolk, and he's done 30 years of working with trauma, and he's got a great book out called The Body Keeps Score. Peter Levine works with that anxiety that I spoke about before. So using somatic therapies, things like neurofeedback or EMDR, these are making huge advances in working with trauma. And I bring this up here because if you've been struggling with actually becoming present in your body, perhaps there's trauma in your life, or maybe you know that there's trauma in your life. And I just want to say that if that's true, then perhaps it's better to seek out healing from a somatic practitioner first before you actually go through this program, because this program is not designed to help with that. So sometimes getting into your body can be re-traumatizing until you've gone through the healing process, and that has to happen very carefully. So that's why I bring it up here. So honoring your fear and accepting your fear as your natural inheritance is a good first step in working with your fear. It doesn't help to demonize your fear. And I learned this lesson a few years ago, soon after I lost my job. So losing my job is kind of what propelled me into becoming a coach. But I had a lot of fear. because I was afraid that I was going to lose my home. I was afraid I was going to lose everything. And so I decided soon after I lost my job that I was just going to ignore my fear and move forward. And the more that I tried to ignore it, the more present it was. So you've heard of that saying, what you resist persists. Well, that's very true with fear. So it doesn't work to override it or ignore it or to demonize it. So it was important for me to realize and recognize that fear has a vital purpose in our life. It keeps us safe. It can save our life. It can protect us from harm. So honor that fear. Accept it. Things are so much easier when we are aware. And one of the tricks is to know when to listen to your fear and when to face it and move through it. So there are times when we need to listen to it and get ourselves to safety. If you understand how your fear system works, then it's easier to make that choice. So if you're feeling fear, can you trace it back to a thought or to what's actually happening in your life right now? So if you're facing fear coming from your gut in relationship to a potential danger in the moment, it's very important to listen to your fear. There's actually a great book out there by Gavin de Becker. It's called The Gift of Fear. And in that book, he lays out how women in particular in our culture are trained to be nice, you know, that nice thing. And unfortunately, what happens is we often override our fear or our gut when it's telling us that there could be danger here. And that can lead to getting assaulted or kidnapped or hurt in some shape or form. And he had plenty of stories to tell about that in this book. And so it's really important for women in particular to listen to our gut. However, if your fear is caused by thoughts, particularly catastrophizing or the worry brain, what you can do is examine the thought and decide if it's real or not, and if it makes sense to listen to it. So just to give you an example, kind of a funny situation. One day my daughter told me that she had thought about filing her teeth down. And I went right into the fear response. Now, she wasn't actually telling me that she was going to do it. This is back when she was a young teenager. She told me that she had thought about it at one point because she was kind of into heavy metal and that sort of stuff. And that was sort of a fad at that point. I went ballistic because I went right into my fear that she was actually going to do this thing. And it was all a story in my head because she wasn't going to do it. And the problem with that moment was I actually pushed her away from me with my reaction. Now, if I could have just paused for a moment and really thought about it and listened to what she had to say, then it could have been a situation that brought us closer together. So that's just a quick example of one way where catastrophizing can get in the way, and why it's important to be able to trace the thought back and say, okay, is this really real? Is it happening right now? Or am I just making up a story about what's going to happen in the future? So often, our stories about the future, as I said before, are nothing but speculation. They're not real. But our stories can set off our fear system. So those are just some simple tips. And I want to actually lead you to a great article I found that was posted in the Huffington Post in 2013. And I put a link to the story up on the lesson page. So it gives some great tips about when to listen to your fear and when not to listen to your fear. So I thought it was a good article and I wanted to share that with you. So this presentation, or both presentations, were designed to help you understand your fear on a deeper level so that you can honor how it benefits you and not turn it into a shadow issue. It's all about being more conscious, especially around your choices. When you're aware, you can work with your fear instead of resisting it. Now, I love this image here because when we choose to love and accept all of ourselves, including our fear, our choices tend to be healthier, and we can stop wasting energy beating ourselves up for choices that don't work out and learn from them instead. And this is also true of our fear. So we'll dive a little deeper into that coming up here when we're going to get into how fear is related to the ego. So talking more specifically about social fear there, which is important, and you'll learn why. And how sometimes fear can be seen as the guardian at the gate of our entrance to a deeper relationship with our soul.